So this is just a video on how to butter rosebush. To butter rosebush, you need something to butter onto. So this is rootstock. This is the middle of winter, by the way. So what you want to do is cut yourself a piece of stock. So about pencil thickness or thicker, and about a foot long. Then what you want to do, you want to get a knife, make sure it's very sharp. It's very, very important that you keep all your tools sharp when doing this. Then you see the top two buds of your stick, you leave those, and then you just cut all the rest out down the stick. So that's your stock ready to propagate. Then when you take your rootstock and you just poke it in a pot like that, that's just general purpose potting mix. Now we'll just wait for it to grow. So as you can see, the stock is now grown and it's time for budding. The next step in the process of budding is actually selecting the budwood. It's an important step, so I'll show you that and how we go about it in the next stage. The next part in the process of budding is taking your budwood. Now you see this flower here, it's just opening. That's too soft, so you would actually cut the stem just at the base, and then your buds are just behind the leaves there. That one just there. But the flower there being quite young is very soft. You could use this if you had to, and what you would do is you just wouldn't use the top ones. You might get one of the bottom ones, but your take wouldn't be as good. The best ones to find are when the petals have just finished dropping off. The budwood then is mature and the buds are ready to go. If it's too soft, the buds just won't take. You can use flowers like that, that's fine. But then when you get to like really, really old ones, which spring, so you wouldn't really find them, but when you see like it's died like that and you've got the stick underneath, that's when it starts getting a little bit too dry for budding. If the buds have shot, sure if you can see that, it started shooting already, you can possibly use them, but it's not ideal. It's best to get the buds when they're still quite small like that. So next I'll show you how to actually take the bud off the stem ready for budding. So when cutting your budwood, you can see this stick here, that's almost as thick as my finger. If you have to, you can use it, but it's just way too thick for what you really want to be using. You want to be getting the stem of the budwood. This one here is about nice. So you just cut it down there. That's just a little bit skinnier than the stock will be budding, so it makes a nice fit. You can see like it's probably a third of the size of my finger. So what you do then, you cut the leaves off and you just leave a bit of the sheath there of the leaf. So now you've got your stick. Up the top where the flower was, just below the flower, you'll see like on this bit, there's a group of buds just below the flower. You don't want to be using those buds. You want to start on the next bud down, right down to the base, which is down there. But then the bud right down near the bottom of where it's grown up, those ones there can be like take a lot longer to get going. If you're doing it in a perfect world, like your middle three buds is what you would use, or maybe even those three, and leave the bottom two in the top bit. That's in a perfect world. When you do it commercially, you use pretty much everything you can. It just takes, these might just take a little bit longer to grow. So 1, 2, 3, those three buds there would be pretty much perfect to use. So to select your bud, you always want to start from the top of the stick, and you've got to make sure that your knife is super sharp the sharper it is the better. If it's blunt, it's just going to bruise the wood. So first thing you do is you just cut that just so it's a couple of millimeters sticking out. Then you cut just below the bud. You cut like that and you cut across. You can see that, cut like that. Then you put your thumb on it and you tear the bark away like that, because that gives you a handle to work. Then if you roll it over like that, you could put the knife just below the wood there and actually pull the wood out. You see that one there hasn't come out all the way. It means the wood's a little bit dry. In a case when your stick is dry, when you take your bud, just cut it very, very shallow like that and actually leave the wood in behind it. It's not ideal and you'll get a worse take, and when the bud actually grows, if you get wind it can actually snap it off, so you have to let it sort of cut it when it grows out and try and get it to strengthen itself up. It's not ideal, but as you're working down the stick, see, as you pull the bud off, you're stripping bark, and it will damage the buds up further if you've started the wrong end. That's why you always start from the top end and work your way down the stick. So that's perfect. It's come out. You can see that the bark is flicked out. It's just nice. When it's dry and you try and flick the wood out behind it, you'll actually pull the eye of the bud out the middle. So that's the perfect bud just there. Just like that. Alright, so we'll put the bud in. Once again, when you take your bud, you just cut that sheath a bit, and you cut the bud and you peel the bark, then you turn it over, and as you're holding the bark you pull the bud away and it starts separating, and then just use a knife to hold the wood and you peel it like that. It's probably damaged that bud a little bit, which does happen sometimes. You see it's torn there, so we'll go for another one. And you see that it's come out nice. So now when you cut here, find a nice flat bit and you do a cut across like that on an angle, and then you cut up like that. Then you can just peel the bark open like that. Then because you've got this bit of bark here, that's your handle to hold the bud. I've cut it on an angle up the top because then you can peel that one there, and as you slide the bud in, that will sit under the bark while you put that one there up. That's why you cut an angle. And you can just use your knife to push it down like that, and then just cut that off on the angle of the bud. So I'll do another one over here. See that one there I've cut probably too shallow and the wood's already fallen out. So once again, cut on the angle, and we're just cutting down so that just to peel the bark. That's all you're doing. And then just slide it down. You don't have to go all the way to the bottom. Just slide it down so there's a nice piece in there. Now, to cover them, we use these patches. It's just a bit of rubber with a staple in it, and we stretch it, push it across, and just put like that. Very unlikely you'll be able to get hold of those. They're quite hard to get unless you're a commercial grower. So what you can do is get a lackey band and then just cut it like that, and then you just go around like that and then over itself, and then you just wind it around like that, just keeping the band stretched, you know, so it's firm, and then just tie it up like that, leaving the actual eye of the bud free. You will not need to take this off. With the patches we have to take them off because they smother the bud, but this here will actually just keep growing, and this will probably just perish on its own and fling off. It only needs to be on there for 1 or 2 weeks. It's not important at all. Just the bud will set within about 3 days, and that should grow nicely. If after 3 weeks you want to, you can take the lacquer band off, but that's up to you. But that's pretty much all there is to budding a rosebush. So just another point on budding. If you rootstock, when you cut it, if you can't peel that bark easily, it's not quite ready to bud. You see how I've got to sort of really scrape that to open it. So that's really putting quite a lot of pressure. See how it's torn there, and it's tearing on the cambium layer. That means it's not quite ready to bud. I can put a bud in there and it possibly will take, but it's not ideal. You want your sap flowing enough that when you cut it, it just peels open nice and easily. So when it's time to take the patch off, or if you're using a lacquer band and you want to take it off, that callousing there is almost like scabbing. See how it's healing the cut, and it calluses on each side of the bud as well. When that's all calloused up, that's when you know that it's time to take it off. Sometimes it can take 2 weeks, other times it can take 4 weeks. It's not necessary to see that, but if the bud's still alive after 3 weeks, generally it will stay living. Sometimes you can take the patch off and that will shrivel up and die, which means it hasn't quite taken properly. But if you can see here, I can stick the knife up under the bud, under the bottom of it. A lot of the times the bud will lift at the bottom, and that's perfectly normal. It's still alive, it'll still grow. There's the bud itself ready to shoot. That there is sometimes they'll peel and it'll actually die back, and it'll actually die right to the bud and it will still grow, or sometimes it'll actually die just past the bud. Top half will be green and this here won't actually live. You'll notice it if it does it. It's just another thing to look out for. Another thing to finish off with is the top. Some rootstocks you can cut straight off, take that right off, and the bud will grow after the bud's set, so you know, about 3 weeks after budding. Other rootstocks you have to trim the top and maybe like cut it right back really hard and wait for the bud to shoot out. You might have to trim it 2 or 3 times before the bud will actually shoot out. This rootstock here, we cut the top right off. It's called Dr. Huey rootstock. But then you've got your Fortuniana rootstock. It's terrible stuff. It makes a good rosebush once it's growing, but you have to basically trim the top and sometimes crack it and shock it and then give it a heap of fertilizer, you know, just try and get these buds to grow. So that's something else that, you know, if you're budding at home, you might want to just trim. You can bud onto anything. You can bud onto a stem of another rosebush. A lot of times you can just cut off, and then after a couple of weeks this one will start growing. But I guess that's just up to trial and error, something to mess around with. But pretty much that's all I can really tell you about rose budding, and I guess I'll end the video here.